You've probably heard the timeless hits of R&B legends, their soulful melodies, soulful lyrics, and brilliant careers. But behind the spotlight and applause, there's a dark reality that few people know. Black artists who once dominated the Billboard charts, owned expensive mansions, and were idols of millions of people faced bitter tragedies in their personal lives. The story of a king of soul who was killed by his own father at home, or a musical genius who fell into such despair that he died in a mental hospital without a single relative by his side, are just a part of the dark picture of this music industry. Join us as we explore 25 tearful, angry, and regretful stories about Black R&B artists. These stories will make you think deeply and remember the legends that never got their due recognition. Don't leave yet. Stay until you hear them all, because none of them deserve to be forgotten. Otis Redding was a man who matured early and quickly entered the history of soul music. Although he was only 26 when he died, he left behind a great musical legacy that the whole world had to bow and respect. With a warm and powerful voice, Otis turned each song into an emotional story. His first notes were not simply lyrics, but words from his heart, leaving listeners unable to contain their emotions. But just days after recording one of the songs that would define his career, Otis died suddenly in a plane crash that no one was prepared for. On December 10, 1967, Otis and his band the Bar-Kays boarded a small plane to Madison, Wisconsin, for a performance. Despite the bad weather, Otis decided to fly anyway. "Music can't wait," he said with a smile. But around 3 p.m., as the plane neared its destination, it disappeared from radar. Residents near Lake Monona heard a loud bang and then silence. The plane crashed into the cold water, with only one band member, James Alexander, surviving on another commercial flight. Otis's body was found hours later, still clutching his seat belt, his mouth open as if he were singing. News of his death shocked the nation. Just the day before, Otis had appeared on television singing to audiences. Some suspected the plane was too old, while others suggested that Otis might have sensed something was wrong. Before the flight, he had pensively written a song about loneliness and death, as if he had predicted his fate. The song, "Sitting on the Dock of the Bay," which he wrote and recorded, became a hit shortly after his death. However, Otis never heard the finished version of the song, with the echo of the ocean waves at the end, a detail he himself suggested. Otis once sang, "I just sit here and watch the tides roll by." And then he disappeared into the water forever, his life ending too short but meaningful. Although Otis's life was too short, he left behind a profound message about living each moment to the fullest. Live well, because no one knows when their last tune will be played. Sam Cooke, with his sweet voice and elegant style in a white suit, became an indelible musical icon in the hearts of fans. He was not only an R&B legend, but also the first person to break the racial barriers in American popular music. From a gospel singer in church, Sam Cooke rose to national stardom with immortal hits such as "A Change Is Gonna Come" and "You Send Me." However, behind the halo was a man full of contradictions, lonely, irritable, and always struggling with the pressures of fame, alcohol, and complicated relationships. Despite his great success, Sam did not have peace. He founded his own record label, a rarity for a black artist at the time, but faced lawsuits, financial disputes, and threats for daring to fight for the freedom and rights of black artists. Before his death, Sam Cooke had been acting strangely, seemingly sensing that he was being watched. On the night of December 11, 1964, Sam left a Los Angeles club with a woman named Elisa Boyer and checked into a motel. Just an hour later, Sam was shot dead at the motel's front desk by the motel manager, Bertha Franklin. Franklin claimed that Sam attacked her while drunk, aggressive, and nearly naked, and that she had shot him in self-defense. However, the injuries on Sam's body, including bruises, broken bones, and blood coming from his head, did not match Franklin's account. The story became even murkier when Elisa Boyer, the woman who was with Sam, was later convicted of kidnapping. So who was really behind Sam Cooke's tragic death? Was he murdered for speaking out for equality, for the rights of black artists, and for his songs that challenged deep-seated prejudices in society. The police closed the investigation too quickly, and many questions remain unanswered. To this day, Sam Cooke's death remains a big question mark. It was not only the passing of a musical talent, but also the end of a great dream, a dream of change that Sam sang in the song "A Change Is Gonna Come." His death has extinguished a hopeful vision, but his lyrics live on in the hearts of those who loved and felt the truth in his music. Sam Cooke dared to live and sing the voice of justice, and sometimes, those who do the right thing pay the highest price. But if you remember Sam Cooke, live a good life, because what he did and what he gave will always be a shining beacon for the change we continue to dream of. Jackie Wilson, one of the greatest musical legends of the 1950s and 1960s, was known as Mr. Excitement and was an icon of the first generation of performers. With his ability to spin, roll, and dance with great skill, he conquered the hearts of millions of fans and left a deep mark on the music industry. Elvis Presley once said, "If anyone deserves to be king, it's Jackie Wilson." But few people know that behind that halo is a life full of harsh challenges. From a young age, Jackie was famous not only for his talent, but also for his wild lifestyle and troubles. He signed a contract with Brunswick Records, a music company controlled by the mafia. Although it brought in millions of dollars in revenue, Jackie only received a small portion of it. The rest was laundered through secret accounts, and although he complained constantly, his complaints were silenced by threats and isolation. Despite being seen by the public as a wealthy superstar, Jackie had to borrow money to support his family, a secret he kept until his death. On September 29, 1975, while performing Lonely Teardrops at a charity event in New Jersey, Jackie suddenly collapsed after singing the line, "My heart is crying." Initially, the audience thought it was part of the performance, but in fact, it was a sign of a serious stroke. He suffered cardiac arrest and fell into a vegetative state. From then until his death in 1984, Jackie lived out his remaining years in silence, motionless and unaware of the world around him. Those who had admired him gradually drifted away, and his family could not afford the medical expenses. In his later years, Jackie Wilson lived in oblivion, and there were times when people discovered him in a shabby nursing home. No one cared, no friends, no relatives. Only then did some medical staff realize that the man lying there breathing oxygen was once a star who had shaken the whole of America with immortal hits. Jackie Wilson's death was not just the end of a legend. It was a bitter reminder of oblivion and the high price an artist must pay when their career is manipulated by greedy people. Do you remember the emotional melodies that Jackie sang, or his lyrics? Live a kinder life every day? Because sometimes, great artists don't need mourning after they die, but just a little justice while they are alive. In the 1960s, Howard Tate was considered the secret voice of American soul music. His voice, powerful, deep as fire, but also soft as smoke, conquered the hearts of many music lovers. Hits like "Get It While You Can" were a testament to the depth of his music, making listeners choke up with the rare sincere sadness that only great artists can convey. However, luck did not smile on Howard like it did on many of his colleagues. He lost everything in the blink of an eye, and then lost himself for 3 long decades. Starting his career at a very young age, Howard quickly stood out with his talent and special voice, a close student of legendary producer Jerry Ragavoy. He signed contracts with major record labels, expected to become a music icon. But when his career was on the rise, a family tragedy struck. His daughter died in a fire, and the shock was too much for Howard to bear. He began to abuse alcohol and drugs, and his career quickly fell apart. Overnight, he lost his home, custody of his children, and his reputation. In the 1980s, Howard disappeared from the public radar. Some rumored he had died, while others believed he had become homeless. It wasn't until 2001 that a music journalist overheard a middle-aged man singing in a small church in New Jersey. When asked for his name, the man simply smiled and said, "I used to be Howard Tate." His comeback was brief but touching, with a new album that was well received by critics. but his health was failing and his age prevented him from continuing on the musical path. In 2011, Howard Tate died in a rundown hospital after a long battle with cancer and diabetes. In his final days, he often lay staring at the ceiling and mumbling the lyrics of old songs he had composed for others. Howard's death was not noisy, but for those who heard him sing, it was a heartbreaking wound. A talented artist was turned away by the world when he needed them most, and that is a sadness that middle-aged audiences understand better than anyone. Howard once sang, "Take what you need while you can." His life is a testament to this truth. If we do not know how to appreciate and preserve the values in life while we still can, we will only have regrets later. Live kindly, because sometimes a greeting or a small gesture can save a soul from darkness. Ray Charles was blind, but he saw the soul of America more clearly than anyone else. On stage, he always wore a white suit, his hands flew across the piano keys, and his voice had the power to silence an entire audience. Ray was not only a great icon of soul, jazz, and blues, but he also broke down the color barriers in American music, opening the way for artists like himself so that music would no longer discriminate. But behind the stage lights, there was a wounded Ray Charles, with a past steeped in pain, addiction, and memories that no one wanted to exploit. Ray lost his sight at the age of 7, and at 15, he lost his mother, the only person who had ever been by his side. The loneliness of his childhood followed him throughout his life. Music was where Ray found salvation, but it also took him into a world where everyone wanted a piece of him, but no one was willing to share the burden he carried. Ray battled drug addiction for decades. Although he successfully kicked the habit, he lived in fear that one day he would relapse. Long nights after each performance, Ray would sit alone, sip wine, play guitar, and cry silently, tears that no one could see. By 2003, Ray's health began to decline severely. Doctors diagnosed him with severe liver disease, cirrhosis, and multiple organ failure. Ray refused aggressive treatments because he did not want to die in a cold hospital bed. Instead, he organized a short farewell tour as a thank you to those who loved him, then returned to his home in Beverly Hills to live out his final days. In those days, his maid recalled that Ray often mumbled old songs, wondering, "Will the audience still clap for me?" And when he passed away, the whole world was shocked. However, some of his close friends believed that Ray knew the end. He passed away quietly, without leaving many last words. Some people rumored that he refused to use strong painkillers to feel every last beat of his heart, like the last note in his tragic life. Ray Charles has passed away, but left a musical legacy that lives forever in the hearts of his fans. And the question remains, how many talents can soothe the loneliness of a child who once sat crying in the corner of an orphanage? If you still hear Ray's piano playing somewhere, remember that living well is not about being remembered, but about letting the suffering souls know that they are not lost in this world. David Ruffin was a man with a voice so powerful it could tear the hearts of listeners. Amidst the temptations of life, he was the soul of a generation, a voice that spoke for Black people who yearned to be heard. But behind that soulful voice was a complex man, prone to anger, addicted to drugs, and ultimately, suffering a lonely death in the city that had once celebrated him. David rose to national fame with My Girl, one of the most enduring love songs in Motown history. However, his popularity led to his dismissal from the group in 1968. He later attempted a solo career, but never reached the heights of his earlier glory. Addicted to drugs, arrested multiple times, and prone to violence, David lived as if he were immortal, invulnerable, and beyond redemption. In June 1991, after a night of partying, David left his West Philadelphia home and shortly afterward knocked on the door of a hospital with signs of drug overdose. When questioned, he simply repeated, "I'm fine, just need to rest." But just a few minutes later, he suffered a heart attack and died. The police determined the cause of death to be drug overdose. However, the strange thing was that no one was with him at the time. No one knew where he had been the night before, and no one took him to the hospital. Some even suspected that David had been left alone, unattended, after overdosing as an unbearable burden. The case was quickly closed without further investigation, no arrests, and the public, who had long since turned their backs on him, saw David's death as the price to pay for his rebellious, turbulent life. David Ruffin once said, "I'm no angel, but I know how to sing to make people cry." And it was his voice and the way he died, cold, alone, without anyone by his side, that made the hearts of those who loved him cry all over again. If you loved his seductive love songs, take a moment to love yourself, because sometimes the greatest talents are the most forgotten when they are no longer in the spotlight. Curtis Mayfield was one of the most profound and intellectual figures in American soul music. He was not only a singer, but also a gifted storyteller, a voice for the Black community in an era of violence, injustice, and division. Curtis's songs, especially the soundtrack to the film Superfly, were not only melodies but also powerful messages, like prayers calling for change. But fate took his voice and body in an unexpected incident right on the stage where Curtis had dedicated his life to fighting for what was right. In August 1990, during an outdoor performance in Brooklyn, New York, it was raining and windy. When Curtis took the stage, the crowd applauded. But just a few minutes later, while he was singing, a strong wind blew the steel frame of the overhead lighting system off. A heavy metal bar fell on his neck, causing Curtis to fall to the stage and become paralyzed from the neck down. From that moment on, his life changed forever. Despite being confined to a wheelchair, on a ventilator, and living in constant pain, Curtis never gave up. In his final years, unable to lift his arms, he continued to record the album New World Order by lying down and singing each phrase, then putting them together. A technician recalled that Curtis once had to cough continuously for 20 minutes just to record 2 words, but he persevered and refused to give up. Curtis Mayfield died in 1999 due to complications from diabetes and the aftereffects of the accident. He passed away quietly, without any praise or a grand funeral. However, for those who heard him sing, it was an irreparable loss. Some say the accident was a cruel test from fate, while others believe Curtis was tested to prove that his lyrics were stronger than his body. Curtis Mayfield never complained about life. He once said, "When life takes something away from you, it teaches you something else." And he taught the world a lesson in resilience, in keeping the light in your soul even when the darkness outside is overwhelming. If you are alive, walking, laughing, cherish every moment and be kind, because you never know who is fighting a pain they never talk about. When Aretha Franklin took the stage, she not only sang, but she inspired, touching every corner of her listeners' souls. Her voice became a symbol of strength, dignity, and unconditional love. Aretha not only redefined soul music, but also reshaped the position of Black women in a society full of prejudice and injustice. However, behind the throne of the Queen of Soul was a woman who had quietly fought pain all her life. Aretha Franklin experienced many tragedies, becoming pregnant as a teenager, losing her father in a shooting, going through 2 divorces, and facing the constant pressure to maintain her legendary image for 6 decades. In the final years of her life, she largely withdrew from the media and the spotlight. She didn't want anyone to see her. She was very weak, a close friend shared. Despite the ravages of pancreatic cancer, Aretha continued to perform at memorials. In the summer of 2018, she stopped eating and drinking, lying motionless, but still asked to listen to her old recordings. When Aretha Franklin passed away, the whole world was silent. But the truth is that before that, she isolated herself, not allowing the media to get close, as if she wanted to leave without being bothered by anyone. People say that Aretha left like a queen, but only she knew the pain she had endured all her life. The crown she wore on her head was not just a symbol of fame, but a burden, a responsibility that no one could fully understand. When Aretha's singing stopped, all that remained was a heart that had devoted so much to others that it forgot that it needed to sing for itself. If you ever hear one of her songs and feel empowered, live a life worthy of that message. Because sometimes a meaningful life starts with listening the way Aretha listened to the world with her open heart. Florence Ballard was once known as the true soul of the Supremes, the legendary group that made Motown famous. Before Diana Ross rose to stardom, Florence was the lead singer, strong and emotional. She didn't need perfect technique, but sincerity and instinct in every note. But the glory of the music industry belongs to the chosen one, and Florence was not that person. She quietly left the spotlight until her heart stopped beating in a shabby apartment where no one knew. In 1967, Florence was kicked out of the Supremes. People said she was unprofessional, but the truth behind it was that she was tired of being ignored and the obvious favoritism towards the other members of the group. After leaving the Supremes, Florence tried to start a solo career. She signed a contract, but no one supported her. A canceled album, a few small shows were not enough to lift her name from oblivion. Finally, Florence quietly disappeared from the spotlight, living a quiet life. No one cared. In 1974, Florence lived with her 3 children in a cramped apartment, living on social welfare. A neighbor said that she had seen her singing alone on the balcony, as if she was rehearsing old songs. Once she went to the bank to borrow money, but when she said, "I used to be supreme," the staff just looked at her silently without helping. No one paid attention to her anymore. On February 22, 1976, at the age of 32, Florence died of a heart attack in silence, without a lavish funeral or memorial. People said that Florence died of poverty, of being forgotten, but the painful truth was that she died of a heart that had been broken too many times, a talent that had been neglected and drained of life. She was the voice that made the Supremes sing, but in the end had to be silent. If you ever thought that fame was immortal, remember Florence. And if you ever shed a tear over a song, be kind, because behind the spotlight are countless voices that need to be loved, who have devoted everything to music and life. So, let's pay attention to the people around us, appreciate the existence of those who have devoted the most, and accompany them through every note. We have looked back at the tragic deaths of artists, but the journey is not over. The following stories will make us look back at an era full of pain, forgotten hearts. And finally, the question remains, are celebrities more abandoned? Share your thoughts, because maybe your answer will awaken others, helping them understand more about what artists have to endure. Barbara Lewis once conquered the hearts of millions with her soft, deep voice and emotional melodies. The song Hello Stranger brought her to the top, becoming an icon of the ballad soul music of the 60s. She brought not only music, but also a genuine emotion, a gentle sadness, like the last breath of a rainy day. But like a prophecy, the silence in Barbara's voice was also her way of withdrawing from this world. After her resounding success, she withdrew from the spotlight, refused interviews, and almost disappeared. Few people knew that behind the spotlight, Barbara had to fight a chronic illness. She lived a reclusive, quiet life in a suburb, far from the world that once loved her. A medical staff recalled that, in her last days, Barbara often closed her eyes and listened to old records, her hands trembling on the cassette player, as if searching for past moments. When the news of Barbara's death was announced, there was almost complete silence. No condolences, no mourners, no honors. Her death came quietly, just like her career had been forgotten, even though she had devoted everything to music. Barbara did not need crowds, did not need honors, but she had the whole world quietly listening to her singing. If you have ever heard Hello Stranger, live a life that does not let anyone leave this world in oblivion. Live so that the talents, the voices that rose in music, will always be remembered, even though they have long since left us. Barry White was a symbol of love and strength in music, especially with his deep voice, both strong as thunder and soft as silk. The 70s saw him become a sex symbol, but behind that glamour was a body increasingly ravaged by illness. At the end of his life, Barry faced high blood pressure, diabetes, and severe kidney failure. Despite his failing health, he always sang, still keeping his passion for music to the end. A friend recalled that, while on dialysis, Barry still sat singing softly to other patients in the room. That was his love for music and for people, even though his body was no longer strong enough to maintain the deep, soulful notes that once captivated the world. When he passed away, people remembered dozens of immortal love songs, but few knew that Barry once shared. The most painful thing is not illness, but being forgotten when you are no longer at the top. Life sometimes demands not only admiration, but kindness, and Barry left that with his voice, the deepest voice ever heard on earth. Tammy Terrell was a shining star in Motown history, with a career that was just beginning to blossom. She was 20 when she and Marvin Gaye created timeless love songs like Ain't No Mountain High Enough. But behind that bright smile was a body that was weakening every day because of malignant brain cancer. Tammy was diagnosed with a brain tumor when her career was at its peak. During a performance with Marvin, she suddenly collapsed on stage, marking the beginning of a heartbreaking end. Despite multiple surgeries, Tammy's health continued to fail. Marvin often visited the hospital, sat by her bedside, and sang to her. A nurse recalled that Tammy once whispered, "I'm afraid of the light because I know it's going to be dark." She died at the age of 24, and her death was not only a personal loss for Marvin, but also the interruption of a talent that had yet to fully develop. Tammy's death is a painful reminder that, if life is a song, we should sing it while we can, because we never know when the chorus will come. Donny Hathaway was one of the saddest musical geniuses of the 20th century, with a voice that not only touched the heart, but also resonated like a silent conversation with God. Songs like A Song for You and Someday We'll All Be Free were not only beautiful melodies, but also voices of pain and hope, songs to which one turns when one's heart is broken. However, behind those soulful ballads was a tormented soul, suffering from severe schizophrenia, with paranoia and constant suspicion of those closest to him. On the night of January 13th, 1979, Donny Hathaway was found fallen from the 15th floor balcony of the Essex House Hotel in New York. Without a suicide note, no one knows for sure what happened in room 1705. Donny's closest friends said he had been happily recording and chatting for hours before, showing no signs of despair. Some suspect he was framed, while others believe he gave up on life. But no one can deny that Donny left with too much pain to heal. Donny Hathaway once sang, "Someday we'll all be free." But the freedom he dreamed of came at a high price. His death is a reminder of the importance of living well and not being silent when witnessing those around him silently struggling with the storms in their minds. The freedom Donny desired could not ultimately come to him, but we can learn from his story to not ignore the signs of pain in life, to always listen and support each other. Etta James was a firecracker on stage. With her powerful, husky, soulful voice, she touched the hearts of millions. Her songs were more than just music, they became symbols of love and deep emotion, resounding at lavish weddings to small churches in the American South. But behind the spotlight, Etta James' life was a long and challenging journey, filled with tears, addiction, domestic violence, and painful neglect. Born into poverty and abandonment, Etta grew up in a neighborhood full of hardship and deprivation. She became addicted to drugs at a young age, and although she shared the stage with legends like Ray Charles and Sam Cooke, she was shunned by the music industry because of her uncontrollable personality and personal problems. She was arrested, sent to rehab, and spent more time in medical facilities than in the recording studio. In the 1980s, the name Etta James was almost forgotten. She lived in poverty, could only sing in small bars, and always tried to hide her scars and needle marks. By 2010, when she was diagnosed with terminal leukemia, only a few artists and loyal fans sent condolences. In her final moments, she asked her son, "Do you still remember my voice?" There were no flowers, no farewell songs, just the steady sound of a heart monitor and a dull gaze staring up at the white ceiling. A few months before her death, Etta still tried to record her last song, but her health was no longer strong enough to sing a single note. After her passing, only a few young artists posted tributes, but then social media quickly moved on to other topics. A legend has quietly passed away, as if the glory she once had was just a distant memory of a generation gone by. The question that haunts everyone is why such a great talent as Etta was forgotten even when she was still alive? Was it because she was too real, too wild, too strong to fit into a world that loves perfection? There are voices that make us cry, but sometimes there are lives that make us wonder, does compassion still exist in the human heart? Live kindly, because an artist not only needs to be remembered when young, but also needs to be recognized and honored even when the voice has long been silent. Marvin Gaye was an icon of 70s R&B, with music that contained a blend of love, pain, passion, and calls from the depths of the soul. His songs were not just melodies but stories about wounds in society and in his own heart. Marvin Gaye did not just sing, he told stories that he and the world had to face. However, few people expected that the man who had captivated millions of people would leave this world in his father's house, by his own father's hands. Marvin was born into a devout family, where his father was a strict pastor who treated his children cruelly both physically and mentally. He grew up in fear and longed to escape that restraint. Music became his only escape, but the pain of his childhood always haunted him. Despite his success, he struggled with addiction, depression, and intense internal struggles, at one point almost committing suicide. In his later years, Marvin wandered around and found solace in his mother's arms. On April 1, 1984, just one day before his 45th birthday, Marvin Gaye was shot by his father during a small argument over family letters. Marvin, who was struggling with anxiety and drugs, got into an argument with his father. At that point, his father entered the room, grabbed a gun, and shot him. The bullet pierced Marvin's heart, and he died on the way to the hospital. His father was arrested, but was given a suspended sentence, citing self-defense and his age. Marvin Gaye's death shocked the public, with many believing it was a suicide, while others believed he was the victim of a broken family. But there is one thing that cannot be denied. Marvin Gaye lived a life that was too intense, too sensitive, too lonely. He once wrote, "If you can't find love in this world, at least let music soothe your soul." Marvin is gone, but his voice will forever resonate in the hearts of millions. And if there is anything we can learn from his death, it is this: never let the person you love most become the person who can destroy you. Johnny Bristol is one of the lesser-known but influential names in Motown music. Although he was not on stage, Johnny was one of the songwriters and producers behind the success of many music legends, including Marvin Gaye, Tammy Terrell, and Gladys Knight. With his smooth voice and elegant appearance, he left a mark on music lovers and was considered a bridge between love and music. However, that halo could not protect him from a lonely, quiet end in an old apartment, where almost no one remembered his name. Johnny was one of Motown's most successful producers, co-writing and contributing to famous hits such as Ain't No Mountain High Enough. After leaving Motown in the early 70s, he tried his hand at a solo career and had a certain success with the album Hang On, Baby. But by the 1980s, as musical tastes changed and new artists emerged, Johnny was seen as outdated. Record labels turned their backs on him, and he lived mainly on small royalties and small performances. Although he always showed a cheerful and polite attitude, few knew that behind that cheerfulness was a soul full of emptiness. Johnny once confided that there was nothing more painful than writing love songs that were played everywhere, but no one remembered the composer. Towards the end of his life, he lived alone in Detroit. A neighbor recalled that, a week before his death, Johnny often stood by his second-floor window, looking out at the gray sky and whispering old lyrics as if he was trying to hold on to memories of his glory days. On March 21, 2004, Johnny Bristol was found dead in his apartment. There were no signs of violence or a suicide note, and his death was ruled natural causes. However, many still believe that he was exhausted both physically and mentally. Initially, his death was not reported by the press until a week later, when a local newspaper published a short article about the passing of the man who wrote immortal love songs. Johnny spent his life creating a halo for others, but left silently, like a ghost in the world he colored with music. However, for those who love his music, his voice still resonates in each song, as a reminder that kindness is not about fame or recognition, but about giving love that no one knows. Live like Johnny Bristol, gently, quietly, but meaningfully. Billy Preston was a musical genius who left an indelible mark on the soul and rock scene. With his virtuoso touch, he played keyboards for legends like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Aretha Franklin. Every band wanted him in their lineup, but behind the spotlight, Billy lived a lonely life, full of secrets and pain. His childhood was filled with trauma, abuse, and premature fame. The pressure of fame and the need to maintain an image led to depression, addiction, and paranoia. In his final years, Billy lived in a nursing home, suffering from scleroderma and kidney failure. He had to undergo dialysis 3 times a week. A nurse recalled Billy whispering, "I miss the limelight," and crying like a baby. When Billy passed away, the news of his death was only vaguely covered, with a few artists sending flowers, but no one really talked about the dark days he had gone through. Perhaps the world did not know how to deal with a genius who had made great music but had to endure so much pain. Billy once wrote, "If you hear my guitar, it means I'm still alive somewhere." And it is true that his music, his voice, still resonates, reminding us of the importance of gratitude and kindness, especially to the most vulnerable souls. Let us live up to what Billy left behind by listening to and appreciating those around us, especially those who appear strong on the outside but are carrying pain that no one sees. Minnie Riperton was a mesmerizing singer, with a voice that could reach high notes like the wind blowing through the clouds. Her song, "Loving You," made her a global phenomenon, but few knew that behind her fragile appearance, Minnie was secretly battling breast cancer. She was diagnosed in 1976, when her career was at its peak. Doctors told her she had only a few months to live, but Minnie refused to give up. She continued to sing, record, and advocate for cancer screening, becoming one of the first Black artists to openly share her illness in a time when the disease was stigmatized and hidden. During one of her final performances, her voice was so weak that she could only sing the first few lines. The audience was overcome with emotion, many in tears. As one witness recalled, "As long as they could hear me, I was alive." Despite her frail body, her spirit was strong and unyielding. Minnie died in 1979 at the age of 31, leaving a great loss in the hearts of music lovers. Her death shocked not only the music industry but also the community, and many still regret that if she had lived longer, she might have been saved. However, Minnie's legacy is not only her beautiful voice, but also her courage and resilience throughout her short life. She lived a life of kindness, not letting fear overwhelm her, and this has made her immortal in the hearts of those who have heard and felt her gentle, fragile voice. Minnie Riperton was more than just an artist. She was a symbol of inner strength and unconditional love. Teddy Pendergrass, one of the most masculine icons of soul music, had a deep, powerful voice that seemed to hold the listener's emotions in every note. Known as a sensual idol, Teddy had the ability to make the listener's heart flutter, whether in love songs or longing melodies. However, a car accident in 1982 changed everything. The accident left him paralyzed from the neck down, turning him from a passionate star to a person completely dependent on a wheelchair and the care of others. Despite attempts to return to the stage, Teddy's health gradually declined, and in his final years, he lived a quiet life, away from the noise of the public. A relative recalled that, in a quiet moment, Teddy cried as he heard the door close and whispered, "My voice is still there, but I'm gone." This is a pain that is difficult to describe in words, because the most painful thing is not only losing the ability to walk, but losing the right to be yourself, to stand in front of the public, to be an image that millions of people loved. Teddy died of complications after surgery, and when he left, He took with him not only the melodies of love, but also the pain that could not be expressed in words. He was no longer able to live with fame, with vitality in front of the crowd. But the legacy that Teddy Pendergrass left will live forever through each song, each warm melody, and the affection that he gave to the world. Gwen Guthrie may not be a household name in the media, but to soul and funk lovers, she is a musical icon. With her hit single, Ain't Nothing Going On But the Rent, Gwen established herself as an independent female singer in a largely male-dominated music world. Her songs contain strong messages of freedom and independence, especially for women. However, Gwen's life was not as bright as the melodies she wrote. She was diagnosed with uterine cancer and remained largely unknown during her treatment. She chose to face her illness alone, without the attention of the media, not wanting to bother others with her pain. A doctor recalled that while undergoing chemotherapy, Gwen continued to compose songs, writing lyrics on hospital napkins. Gwen passed away at the age of 48. There was no grand funeral, no tributes in the papers. Her voice was slowly forgotten in a rapidly changing musical landscape. But Gwen's quiet strength lives on, an inspiration to those who understand that sometimes living well isn't about chasing the limelight, but about standing up and speaking up even when no one is listening. Phyllis Hyman was a soulful singer. Each word she sang seemed to come from a strangled heart, leaving audiences choked up. She was known for her sad love songs, heartbreaking songs that expressed compassion and deep sadness. However, Phyllis's career was never smooth sailing because she possessed a strong personality, refusing to compromise with a music industry that always wanted to control everything. Despite her outstanding talent, Phyllis was constantly ignored by the media and record labels, which gradually led her to a state of severe depression. On June 30th, 1995, just hours before a performance at the Apollo Theater, Phyllis left a short note with the final words, "I gave it all away." She chose to leave, overdosed on drugs, and was found dead in her apartment. Phyllis's death left an unanswerable question. If music is a place of healing, why can't it save the singer? That question still makes many people cry, because it reflects the harsh truth that sometimes even the most talented artists cannot escape their inner darkness. Phyllis's silence is a powerful warning to the world, where we often listen but never really understand. She was an artist who gave everything in exchange for a little recognition, a little love. And in the silence of her life, Phyllis Hyman engraved a message that sometimes the people we love and listen to the most are the ones who need to be heard and understood the most. Luther Vandross is a musical icon who has won the hearts of millions with his sweet and captivating voice. Every time he sings, the whole audience seems to be drawn into a gentle dream, where all worries disappear. But behind those sweet love songs, Luther's life is extremely lonely. He always lives a closed life, never publicly expressing his feelings, and the closest relationship in his life is with his mother, whom he loved and cared for many years. When his mother passed away, Luther fell into a state of severe depression. In 2003, he suffered a stroke and fell into a coma. Although he later regained consciousness, his health never fully recovered. His emotional voice could not return to its former state, and for the next 2 years, he lived a near-reclusive life, away from the public eye. Luther eventually died in a New Jersey hospital, carrying a deep sadness in his heart that only those who heard him sing "Dance with My Father" could understand. Luther Vandross, who spent his life singing about love, lived in a lonely world where feelings of love were never openly expressed. It is a sad story of a man who devoted his life to music, but struggled with a loneliness that only music could soothe. Isaac Hayes is one of the great music legends who left a deep mark in the history of soul music. He is known for his distinctive image, bald hair, dark glasses, and a deep, powerful yet seductive voice. Not only did he win an Oscar for the theme song in the movie Shaft, Isaac was also a pioneer in combining soul music with funk, symphonic music, and elements of social protest, creating a unique and unmistakable musical style. However, after his glorious years, Isaac Hayes gradually withdrew from the public to find peace in his Scientology beliefs. His life was no longer about glamorous performances, but a journey of deep inner exploration. But fate did not let him go. He suffered from many underlying diseases and faced health difficulties. One morning in August 2008, his wife found Isaac lying unconscious next to the treadmill, his headphones still in his ears. He later died in the hospital, reportedly from a stroke. Strangely, no one knew exactly what his condition was before he collapsed, and no one heard him fall. Some even speculated that he might have been listening to an unfinished record, as if Isaac Hayes had never stopped creating, even when his body could not keep up with the powerful heart inside. Isaac Hayes' sudden death shocked the music world. He was not only an artist, but also a symbol of innovation and relentless creativity. Whitney Houston, one of America's most legendary singers, could easily silence a stage with just one soaring note. She was admired and loved for her outstanding talent, but Whitney's personal life was full of challenges and tragedies. Her failed marriage, her troubled career, and her battle with addiction caused her to endure a constant storm from both the media and society. In February 2012, just hours before she was due to return to the stage to perform, Whitney was found in the bathtub of the Beverly Hilton Hotel. The bathroom was filled with steam, while music was still playing softly on the radio. An autopsy found traces of sedatives and drugs in her blood. A hotel employee recalled that she had just sung in the hallway, her voice still full of emotion, but her eyes were sad and broken. After Whitney's death, the public debated the real cause. Was she a victim of her own doing, or of an industry that took everything? But whatever the case, no one could deny one thing: the world will never have another voice like her. Whitney Houston is an irreplaceable musical icon. Michael Jackson was a global musical and cultural phenomenon.